Yeah. So if you remember, yesterday we were talking about the criticisms of uh, this approach, right? Which particularly we talked about in a nutshell, what to do. Now it looks very simple, but we do have a number of problems in implementing. The first thing that we talked about in criticisms is interpersonal utility competence. So, if you remember, we stopped here. Basically, how to compare who is the worst of individual in a particular economy, right? That's not possible. So exactly see. Now, a number of economists they argue that there can never be any scientific basis for making these welfare comparisons. Just as we cannot compare two human beings, like who is a better human being, who is a uh, worse of human being, we cannot compare them given this mortally mm, number of complex human behaviors that each individual possesses. Similarly, the utility cannot be. Okay. And the second thing is that we have to focus is paraphrase, right? So they say this particular school of thought, they will say that it is very difficult to say or quantify, for that matter, the differences. The moment you move from one point in the Pareto set to another point in the Pareto set, you can see who is the gainer and who is the loser. And the analysis should end there. And the moment you are off OFF, the Pareto set, then you somehow move to the Pareto set, you are making a positive improvement. Correct? So the moment you move somehow, some policy that pushes the society on the Pareto set and hence on the utilities possibilities frontier. So all of you must remember the production possibility frontier, right? It's absolutely analogous to that, the concept. So the moment you are operating on the production possibility frontier, you are using your resources in the most efficient way. And a particular point on the production possibility frontier will tell you what? A particular combination of the two goods which the economy produces. Anything which is below or inside the production possibility set, it is not efficient. So any movement from the utilities possibility set contained by the frontier. So any point on the set to the frontier makes parity improvement. Done. Agreed. And the moment you move from one point on the frontier to the other point of the frontier, you can identify the group of winners and the group of losers. And this particular economic school of thought, they will say that your analysis should end exactly here. And there are certain implications of this sort of uh, view. And to highlight that view, okay, this particular slide is not a part of the textbook. I just put it inside because I wanted to give an example. And this was given by Amartya Sen himself. The idea is there is one flute and three kids. And the property of the kids. Kid one, he can play the flute. Second kid has made the flute. Third kid can neither play the flute nor make the flute, but he's very poor and does not have any other toys to play with. So, to which kid, to whom one should give the flute? The first view, give it to the person, the kid who can play it. Kid one who knows to play the flute, so the flute should be given to him. This is what exactly what we call a liberal. View two, give it to kid number two. He has made the flute, so his labor has gone into it. So he has the ownership of it. So this is the Marxist view. Third view, give it to the poor kid who does not have any other toy. This is egalitarian. Look, we're talking about three different distributions. Now, when I'm saying give it to, that means the liberal, for the liberal, it will uh, appear that the social welfare will go up if it is given to kid number one. For the Marxists, social welfare will go up if it is given to kid number two. For the egalitarians, the third. Now, this is what we call a political. And this is exactly the domain of political economy. So you must have heard of all these jargons, na? There are too many ISMs, isms, liberalism, Marxism, egalitarianism, classical, neoclassical. You hear a lot of jargons all the time. But all these classifications are nothing but how to solve a problem. You have a problem, and the problem we are discussing right now is how to define a social welfare function which can be maximized. So let me ask you one different question to all of you. How many of you, please raise your hand, have seen or heard about the prisoner dilemma game? So I have got 10 hands. Fine. And I am sure all the economic students must have heard about it in micro too.
So game theory wasn't covered in micro 2.
Micro 2, game theory was not there, but if I remember, it's Dr. Aditya who teaches you, right?
No, yes, sir.
Anish Aditya, right?
Yes, sir.
So you covered it in the class.
Yeah. So that's right. Game theory is not exactly a part of Micro 2, but I know that she uses a little bit of applied games because we talk about tariff, right? Tariff retaliation in international economics and everything. And she teaches that. So if to make you understand a little bit of tariff or trade negotiations in the international economics course, I know that she uses a little bit of introductory game theory in the micro. You have done game theory in the sense of Purno games in micro 2 market structure.
No,
That's
sir, oligopoly was not covered.
oh, it was not perfect. Okay, okay. Then I think because of was that an online semester?
Sir.
For you, that semester was online.
Yes, sir.
I think that's the reason. Otherwise, in the offline semester, she covers. I know that must be the issue. Anyway, not a problem. So all you know is if there is a payoff matrix in front of you, with numbers inside the box, you know how to calculate best response and you know how to solve it, right? If you do not know even, I just tell you, I just show you a pair of matrix and just tell you, so what will be your choice if your opponent takes a decision like this. This is what we call the best response analysis. And you will immediately, in 2 minutes, you will pick it up. It's absolutely easy. There is nothing very, very uh, tricky about that. But the question is, if I have those numbers, I know how to solve. So instead of digits like 2, 3, if I have X and Y, can we solve it? Yes, in a different way. Like we assume that this will be the equilibrium if X is the value of X is greater than Y, or Y is greater than Z, or say X by 2 is uh, greater than twice Y. So we make certain functional assumptions and then we can attain a particular equilibrium, right? Exactly the same here. Exactly the same thing. If I have a welfare function, I can maximize it. How to define the welfare function? What is the welfare function in this case? See if I can write somewhere here, just not a part of the slides, but just something like this. So this will be the generic form of a welfare function. I am combining somehow U1 and U2, giving it as the social utility or social welfare, and then I'm maximizing it. How do I choose this F? This is the most important thing. Depends completely on the view that you have. Right? And this is what we call the political. This has, look, please do not ever, when in a political economy course, we are talking about politics, do not ever confuse it, the politics we read in newspaper. Okay. So the politics of Congress and BJP, that's a different type of a thing. That's not the politics we're talking about. The politics that we're talking about is basically the manifesto of your welfare function. Because we all know, and why do we confuse them? It's basically the line is very thin. All the political parties who contest elections, they do have their manifesto. And in general, they will say, this will be benefit to the society. These will be the benefits to the society if we come to power, right? So somehow they trivialize, these political parties, they trivialize the welfare function with certain vested interests. We are not in that vested interests domain. We just strictly think about the utility of a particular individual and hence the utilities of all the individuals and hence a social welfare function. The only thing we can see, there might be different groups. Particularly, the easiest that we can think of is the rich and poor, right? Economic inequality. So we are distinguishing two groups, a rich group and a poor group. So it's very easy to analyze that. And it's also very important to analyze that, because at the policy making, we're going to finally irrespective of class, creed, your allegiance to a political party, irrespective of whatever you are. If you are rich, you're going to be taxed. And if you are poor, you're going to be subsidized. As simple as that. Right? So now, how to choose this functional form? This is the bone of contention. The second criticism, I will not spend much time on it because I have talked about it, is I know that a particular individual, given his preference function and his budget constraint, will optimize. And hence I have non-intersecting indifference curves. He can rank and hence he will optimize. He can rank unambiguously. But the society as a whole does not have preference. As I said, no, like there can be circularity. Take for example again, because I cannot use the whiteboard, individual one prefers A over B over C. Individual two prefers A over C over B. Now the question is, please suppose A, B, C are the different agendas or different combinations of public and private goods produced in the economy. You can think of A, B, C as different alternatives. Alternatives will be case to case basis. So given three alternatives A, B, and C, I have two individuals having this. Now, if I am going to choose only one, A, B, C, out of this, there will be one winner. Obviously, from these two individuals, A will be a clear winner. There is an ambiguity between B and C preferences. But both of them has voted for A over B or C. The moment I bring a third individual, fourth individual, there is no winner. So, from this very simple preferences, you can see the society might not end up with a clear-cut preference. In general, it does not have. So the question that we ask, very, very important. Whose preference does social welfare function represent? Now, this is a thought process. This is a very, very critical thought process. And in fact, there is a particular theorem which we will learn sketchy, in a very sketchy manner in this course, and in a very detailed manner in general equilibrium and welfare economics. That is, and he got the Nobel for that. Arrow. Till date, the youngest recipient of the Nobel Prize in economics, economic sciences. You cannot have a mechanism where social welfare function or social welfare will be maximized. If you have that option, then social welfare will never be maximized. Basically, in very simple layman's parlance, I will say how to interpret Arrow's impossibility theorem. And look, his theorem is very, very closely related to the question that I'm asking right now. Whose preferences does the social welfare function represent? If the society as a whole does not have a preference, I cannot have a preference, then whose preference will be used as a proxy for social welfare? Arrow says, if I'm talking about democracy, like the majority voting, democracy does not mean like the political things that goes on in the newspaper and the media. Democracy means majority voting. The voting system that right now I showed you. Okay. So if there are different agendas and people cast their vote, one agenda should come up as a winner. Which agenda? The majority voting agenda. Now, if there is democracy, social welfare will never be maximized. Why? Just now you saw. If I have 4 individuals, you put democracy, which means majority voting, neither of A, B, C will be a clear winner. Right? A greater than B greater than C for individual 1, A greater than B, C greater than B, C greater than B greater than A, B greater than C greater than A. Only with 4 individuals I can show, even with 3 individuals you can show. That if you just leave it to democracy, which is majority voting, there will not be a clear winner. So social welfare will not be maximized if you talk about majority voting or democracy. If there is a dictator like Kim Jong-un or Kim Jong-il, then if he wants, he can implement the social welfare, maximizing agenda. But because he is an individual, he will try to maximize his own utility, and hence social welfare will never be maximized. So that is, in layman's parlance, Arrow's impossibility theorem. Because he mathematically showed that the preference function that maximizes social welfare is that of a dictator. What is a dictator? Mathematically speaking, a particular social welfare function which is exactly equal to a particular individual. So suppose that individual who is a dictator, he has a function over C1, C2, Cij, then the social welfare function will also be, if this is the case, then social welfare gets maximized. But now this part, the right hand side, is exactly same to that of a particular individual. So he's the dictator. So that's, in layman's language, Arrow's impossibility theorem. So those who will do that course in your final year of MSc code, you will learn the mathematical thing from me. So to come back, that if there is a dictator, the answer is very easy. The social welfare function will reflect that of the dictator, because it is that function he's going to optimize. And as I showed you, very simple manner. Take, for example, I'll just put it here. Individual 1, Individual 2, look, there is no clear winner. Who is the winner? A, B, or C? A represents one type of social welfare function, B another, C another. The different weights you give to the welfare function will determine the welfare function. Suppose A is a set of weights, B is a set of weights, C is a set of weights. Take for example, A is expenditure in health education, B in infrastructure, C in defense. As simple as that. We're talking about public money. We're talking about public finance. We're talking about public goods. Suppose A represents government expenditure on health and education, B on infrastructure, C on defense. And you have three at minimum just three individuals in the economy. And you see their preferences are different. Their rankings are different. And there is no clear-cut winner. So which weights out of ABC will be chosen? To make it even more simple, just take two individuals, the rich, private over public, public over private. So if I'm rich, I can afford all the goods. So I don't mind, or I care very little about the redistribution. Which redistribution? This redistribution is that second welfare theorem. So I can afford anything. I will purchase. I will exchange, I will purchase. But the poor, the purchase power is so low. It depends on the redistribution. So when I'm talking about private, I'm talking about private goods. PB means public goods. So back to politics. In either way or the other. Now, so far, what we have talked about is what is that is should be done. If you remember what is to be done, just hold on for a second. I'm just trying to find that slide. What is to be done? This is to be done. This we have done. Now the question is, after what is to be done, we have seen there are two major problems regarding the welfare function itself. One is that comparison between two individuals' utilities, and second is the social preference. So given the first thing, what is to be done, second thing, what are the problems, third thing that we need to do, how to solve it. I have a problem. I have an objective. Then I have constraints. Then how to achieve that objective, somehow bypassing or somehow taking care of those problems. Which is we call the positive analysis. How it is to be done. No, no. Answer to that can be very, very simple. The government officials or who actually make policies, they do not bother to write down social value. However, whenever they take a project, try to implement, they somehow rephrase the what is to be done things in a different manner. So when I have a project to be implemented, first thing first, what is the cost of it? I have to make, so there is a small village nearby a particular state highway, but there is no proper access from the village to that highway. So I'm talking about infrastructure, social infrastructure. It's a 6 kilometer road which has to be constructed to connect the village to the highway. Then most of the problems of the villages, problems will be there, but they can solve it. But the villagers does not have the resources to make a road. And that is where the government uses it. So the first thing first that the project should take care is what is the net benefit of it. Not only that, what is not only the net benefit of it, the benefit received by different groups. The second thing, is it follow, does it follow the Pareto principle? What is the Pareto principle? I have to make at least one person better off without making anyone worse off. That's the Pareto principle. So, if the particular project does not follow the Pareto principle, so I can see there are two groups of people in that village. One, small traders, and one, the rest. The small traders make a lot of monopoly business because that village is cut off from the other suppliers due to lack of that road connecting to the highway. Once the road is constructed, other traders will come, other people will come with their sellables, and these people will be a loser. So even with a very simple example, we can see that with a particular project, some will gain, some will lose. And the classic example is the bridge over a river connecting two different places. So there is a river. On one side of the bank, there is one village. On the other side, another village. There is no bridge. The government wants a bridge because all the villages will be happy, but one person will be worse off. That person is the boatman. Because once the bridge comes in, there will be no use of the boatman. So he will lose his life. So that's a classic example of winners and losers. Okay. So we have to somehow understand that if the Pareto principle is not maintained, then I have to think of some redistribution. That the winners should compensate the loser, at least till the level that he is neither worse off nor better off. And the most commonly used approach has to look, I've used this word very carefully, summary statistics, describing efficiency and equity. So far, I have talked about efficiency and equity in terms of mathematical problem. Right? MRS equal to relative price equal to MRT. That's the efficiency. Equity, to some extent, we have not mathematically quantified, but yes, to understand basically, uh, it has something to do with something what we call Lorentz curve, which you must have learned in statistics courses. Now, how to measure this efficiency and equity? First thing first, efficiency we have measured from the microeconomic perspective. Now we are into a very different domain, policy implementation. So we have to sum up the gains and losses of different individuals. And equity, we have to find a measure that talks about an overall measure of inequality in the society, right? And what should be the thumb rule? Thumb rule is the project has net positive gains. So you have a positive efficiency effect. And it reduces inequality through the measure that you have taken. Then it should be undertaken. Now, if a project has net loss and increase inequality, it should never be taken. Now, if there is a trade-off that efficiency goes up, inequality increases, but inequality falls, efficiency also falls, then there is a trade-off. So to answer this thumb question, we are coming back again to the same question, but now our objective will be to quantify or measure it. That how much inequality I can accept for some increase in efficiency. Right. Now, benefits. So first, let's measure benefits. Utility theory. What is my benefit? When I'm talking about an individual and his benefit, it is basically the willingness to pay. Because the willingness to pay tells you what? How much I am willing to pay for a particular quantity of a good. Right? That means somewhere that maximum willingness captures the fact that if I have to pay a price, when I pay a price, that's disutility. And when I consume a particular good, that's my utility. So the utility I get from consuming a good minus the disutility of paying for it. That's my net benefit. So when I'm talking about maximum willingness to pay, that means that is the maximum I want to pay because that is the maximum disutility I can incur by consuming, by paying, so that I can consume the good. Which means the price that I pay is exactly equal, not the price, the disutility from the price that I pay is exactly equal to the utility of consuming that good. So basically my reservation utility is net utility is zero. That's the maximum willingness to pay. If I pay a price lower than that, I have a positive benefit. And if the price is more, I will never go for it. So it can be that net utility can be greater than or equal to zero. So when it is equal to zero, that gives my maximum willingness to pay, right? Now, what I exactly pay, that depends on prices. That depends on the market, right? If there is a perfect competition, prices will be low. If it's a monopoly, prices will be high. So prices are determined by market. But what I'm willing to pay, that reflects my preference. And this is why I have to be in the domain of marginal utility. So you have panel A, you have a number of sweatshirts, and this is the willingness to pay. And then it will be a utility card, right? So say for 5 sweatshirts, you can willing to pay 100 or 200. For 10, it might be 300. 15, 400. 20, it will be somewhere around 500, right? Look, it is decreasing, it is increasing at a decreasing order, right? So first order positive, second order negative. Now that means, what are we basically hinting at? Diminishing marginal utility, right? Now this marginal utility curve is nothing but the compensated demand. That is why yesterday I told you to read Slutsky and Hicks decomposition. This is basically coming from Hicks decomposition, which means I do not have any income effect. Why? Think of a very different graph. Income consumption curve. Raise hand if you remember. Income consumption curve. Priyansha remembers. Very good. Priyansha, can you please tell me how does it look?
Sir, um, it is downward sloping. Sir, like I remember we make the supply curve from that.
Income consumption curve. Priyansha. Anyway, you have, suppose, income on your horizontal axis, consumption on your vertical axis. Forget about economic theory. Use your common sense.
Yes, sir, it's upward sloping.
Now, sorry, but I have to use the whiteboard. This is the problem with the whiteboard. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And is the whiteboard coming to screen?
Yes, sir.
Very good. You have indifference curves for an individual. Your income increases. That means everything remaining constant, like the prices of the two goods, your budget line shifts upward. So this will be your equilibrium, equilibrium, equilibrium. So with increasing income, this is how, for this particular picture, this is how your consumption should go. Right? So you have good 2 here, good 1 here, and I am representing the increase in income by upward movement of the budget curve. Nothing else, right? Now, this shape of the income consumption curve can be a straight line, can be like this, can be like this. Why? If it is like this, that means more income you have, you are coming away from good to more towards good one. So, from economic theory, then 1 is a luxury good. It can be like this, where 2 is a luxury good. Or the concept of given goods. Or it can be a straight line going on. A 45-degree line, like consumption, increases proportion. Right? Let's get back to the slides. If you remove these income effect, what do I have in this marginal utility, that panel B? I am saying, given the price determined by the market, what is the maximum you are willing to pay for a particular budget? If your income does not increase, if you have a constant income, so there is no income effect, or the price of other goods do not change. So the relative price of sweatshirts, they do not change. You are a price taker and you do not have any other income effect, then how will your marginal utility curve look? It will fall because of diminishing marginal utility, only because of that, capturing the substitution effect. It's better to have a number of trousers rather than having huge number of sweatshirts. I need to have 2 more pair of jeans. So for this particular good, this type of utility, marginality curve will depict what? The compensated demand curve. Compensated demand because there is no income effect. Had there been an income effect, I will go for an income consumption curve. So if I have this compensated demand curve, assuming no price change, or if price changes, then that amount of money is adjusted. Just go back and revise those Slutsky and Hicks decomposition. This is the Hicks method. So it only measures the substitution effect when there is a price change. Right? Why? It is P1 x1 plus P2 x2 equal to some I, your budget line. If I is suppose constant, some I bar or I, capital I, that's constant. So I'm forgetting about added money. But even if I'm talking about X1, which is good one, which is sweatshirts. If this P2 falls, that means relatively increases, which means sweatshirts become costlier. So that is another income effect. The moment I rule out that, what I do? Because the moment P1, P2, this changes, it also affects my, and suppose you write it down like this. In fact, that will make it more clear. Sorry. Make good one the numerator. Okay. So I'm rewriting that same equation. So P2 by P1 is good 2 in terms of good one. And the price of good one is normalized to 1, and hence we call good one as the numerator. So if P1 increases, X1 will fall, law of demand. But if P1 increases, your real income in terms of good one will also increase. That's the income. So when I take care of it, I'm in the domain of compensated demand curves, which is exactly equal to your marginal utility. So just you will understand this picture the moment you go back to that revision thing, X decomposition. So if you have an ordinary demand curve, which does not rule out income effect, and you have a compensated demand curve, which compensated, it will be a little steeper for normal goods. Now, measuring benefits. Going back to a very old idea, consumer surplus. But the consumer surplus that you have read is the distance between the demand, the area below the demand curve above the price line, right? Here the only thing that I'm changing below the compensated demand curve. Okay. So the dollar value of net benefits. So you add up benefits received by all the individuals. For each individual, you can have a consumer surplus. So what you get is a total willingness to pay. Once you have the total willingness to pay, take out the cost. That will be your net efficiency, right? Remember how to price a public good when we talked about externalities? If I have different individuals that club it together, you can have a compensated demand curve which looks like a step function. Then this shaded area is the net benefit. This one, say for individual who has the maximum, second max, third max, fourth max, fifth max. And the price or the cost, right? Now you understand how can we use compensated demand curve, aggregate them across individuals. I get the total willingness to pay from the society. I have the cost of the project. Take out the cost. I have the net benefit from the cost. Net benefit, which is the efficiency, measuring the efficiency. of that particular project. As long as it is positive, you should take it. If it does not increase inequality. Okay. So it's already 12. So let me stop here. And if you have not revised that, I'll sincerely request all of you to revise, because the small things will help understand all the concepts, because the slides that I always provide or the textbook that I provide, they're very, very simple. But your concepts should be clear. And obviously, when doing these things, when I come to the, if you remember, just before that exam also, the second welfare theorem, the graph was very easy. And the mathematical problem example that I gave, that was also easy. But that exactly reflects how the taxation and subsidy system goes. But your concepts, if you revise those concepts, this will be very, very helpful. Okay, if you have any questions, please go ahead.